One. Hello, everyone. In this video, I'm fortunate enough to chat with one of my favorite filmmakers ever. Truly, this is a chat I can't believe I'm fortunate enough to have the terrific Ruben Ostlund. I don't even know where to begin. Ruben is the director behind films such as Triangle of Sadness, The Square, Force Majeure, the Guitar Mongoloid, Involuntary, Play, and much more. And the fact that I get to chat with legends such as Ruben means the world. Ruben, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. How are you doing today?
Very good. Yeah, I'm good. I'm sitting and writing at the moment. I'm trying to write the first version of The Entertainment System is Down, which is
Yeah.
the film that I'm working on. And today was not 100% a good day. It was like a little bit like that with the writing, but I'm okay. I'm okay.
That's terrific. I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt you while you're doing something like writing a script, and then you take the time to chat with someone like me. Dude, that means the world. But so many different ways I'd love to begin. Normally, when I do an interview, I start off and I ask about, the origins for your love for film. But something that fascinated me about your love for film was I was watching your interviews, and people would ask you, so what are some of your inspirations as a filmmaker? And instead of talking about films from the French New Wave or Italian neorealism, like a lot of other filmmakers tend to do, you actually also started talking about the YouTube clips you've seen in life that have inspired you. And to me, that was endlessly fascinating because I don't know if you know, there's an American filmmaker called Derek C. in France who did Place Beyond the Pines, Blue Valentine, and I got to interview Derek. And what was really fascinating was when I was talking to him, he talked about in film that idea of human behavior, of exploring that in a real way. And it was something weirdly enough that had never occurred to me before about film, that idea of exploring human behavior. And he started talking about a Werner Herzog film called Julian Donkey Boy. And there's that scene where, Werner Herzog's hosing him down and it's in the cold. And Derek said it was the first time he had ever seen someone not act, but physically be cold. They were physically going through the act of being cold on camera. But that's my long-winded way of saying, what does human behavior mean to you as a filmmaker? Why does that aspect of filmmaking appeal to you?
Well, when I'm talking about human behavior, I'm talking about it connected to sociology. If you know
Yeah.
the topic of sociology, to try to understand why we do as we do from looking at our behavior, basically. So there's some classical sociological experiments that maybe you've heard of. For example, the milligram experiment, where there is a test person that is asked by an authority about a doctor is asking him to give electrical shocks to another test person.
Yeah.
And it shows that when we have someone that is like higher than us in the hierarchy, we tend to follow the task, and we are fulfilling the task because we are respectful to hierarchies and so on. And for me, what I like about that way of looking at human beings is that we don't divide people in good or bad, or evil or good. We actually are saying, within the context of this situation, if we were dealing with the same kind of setup of the situation, we probably would do the same. And
Yeah.
that is a beautiful way of approaching, I think, a certain kind of knowledge about us and why we do as we do. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about human behavior. And I think that a little bit when I'm talking about it, that there's a possibility to see some clips, for example, on YouTube that is describing something about us.
Yeah.
It's kind of close connected to candid camera. You know, candid camera, when someone is don't know that they are not aware that they are filmed,
Yeah.
and there's someone staging a setup of a situation, and we look at their behavior. It's like a certain kind of, how to say, positive approach of trying to understand something about us.
Wow. Yeah, and I think when I watch your films, there is such an approach to character that I've never seen before in film. I mean, even in your kind of satirical works, I think it's easy for people to look at satire and say, "Oh, well, that's satire. That's not something that's real." But even in your satirical approaches, like even when you're examining the wealth, the wealthy people, they're still people. They're still real, tangible human people. Is that important for you, even when doing something like satire, to still have these be real characters who act like real people? You're not doing a caricature of what it means to be rich. These are real, kind of what it feels like to be real, intimate people. Is that
Sure.
important for you?
Yeah, of course, it's important to me. For me, it's very important that I can identify with all the different characters' behavior in the scene. So if you have a character that is just doing something completely strange or weird, then I get less interested. But if
Really?
there's a dilemma in the scene, so we can identify the dilemma in the scene and why the situation is hard to handle for all the different characters, then it becomes more interesting for us to watch, because then we also identify with the problem. But I think this is a little bit of a different approach of how you look on, a little bit like in movie making, because in my movies there's not necessarily like a protagonist and an antagonist. I don't
Yeah.
have that kind of simple setup. It's basically more based on different situations, and the identification for the audience is more with the situation, I would say, than the actual characters.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. So is character something that is most important for you in a film, or is it those situations? And what kind of comes to you first as a filmmaker? Do you have to find your way in through the characters, or can you deal with situations?
I start with situations most of the
Really?
time, I would say. So, for an example, just take Force Majeure as an example. Um, I was interested in filming something that took place in the ski resort in the mountains, and because I have a background as a ski filmmaker, so my early years as a filmmaker, between I was 20 and 25, I was traveling around in the Alps and in North America, and filming skiing in the winters, and then making half hour long ski movies with just music that we sold to other people that was interested in skiing. So I wanted to go back into that environment. I wanted to do something in that environment, but in a feature film fiction format. And I had an idea because of a YouTube clip that I've been
No
seeing.
way.
That was it was a group of tourists that was sitting on an outdoor restaurant
Yeah.
high up in the mountains, and all of a sudden they see an avalanche start tumbling down a mountainside.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, all these tourists, they're like, wow, beautiful,
Yeah.
but the
Yeah.
avalanche cracks up and gets bigger, and the cheering gets louder. And then all of a sudden, it's this shift of mood when the cheering goes from joyful and laughters into nervous laughters and then screams in complete panic. And
Yeah.
in the YouTube clip, people were like fleeing, and the snow smoke was coming in and reaching in over the restaurant. And then it turns out that it's only the snow smoke that reaches the restaurant. So the avalanche actually have stopped in a safe distance from the restaurant. So people had to go back and sit down and continuing eating their lunch. And there was something shameful over how they were dealing with the situation. They felt a little bit, ashamed of losing control and screaming and showing themselves scared in that way. And then it turns out there was a false alarm. But what happened with that YouTube clip was that I told a friend about this scene, and he told me, he's an actor, and he told me, because I told him it's going to be a family sitting on the outdoor restaurant, and he said then, what if only the father runs away? And then I immediately understood, okay, this is what the film is going to be about. It's
Wow.
about this incident where the father is like running away from his family, not living up to the role of the man. He should protect his family. He should sacrifice himself for his wife and for his kids. But survival instinct makes him react and just run away. So that is a typical situation that starts my interest. And it's something about that situation that is like, okay, there's a clash between the expectation of who he should be and
Yeah.
what he has done. And then afterwards, then you have to deal with, actually nothing happened. I mean, everything is fine, but still you have a huge problem to deal with. So that is like just a typical situation that I like to
Wow.
base my scenes on.
And that is so fascinating because it was obviously that situation that appealed to you, but yet you knew what you wanted to do with the character and you could see the character that you wanted to explore. So that's such a fascinating way to do it, because I've talked with so much filmmakers, and normally, character, that is something that for them, if they can't see their way in with that, if they can't find something with character almost straight away, well, then it doesn't work for them as a film. But the fact you can find your way in from situations, and that scene again, the scene you just mentioned there, you know, I think of that scene from Triangle of Sadness where everyone's on the boat having dinner and they're throwing up and you know, there's kind of an awkwardness in the air. Some people are kind of sitting down, some people are falling all over. But that's a really fascinating point. So
The same thing with it when it comes to the dinner scene in Triangle of Sadness. You know, I think all of us pretty much more or less knows what is expected from us when we are sitting on a fancy dinner. You know, when we are supposed to eat the right fork and the right knife and so on. And there's an etiquette that is very strong, and we are all a little nervous that we don't know exactly how to deal with that etiquette and deal with how to say, the culture of that situation. And then if you just clash that with seasickness, everybody can relate to, oh no, if I'm seasick and trying to deal with this, there's going to be a dilemma, because I don't want to leave the room. Maybe I don't want to excuse myself and leave the room. I have to sit through the dinner, but at the same time, I definitely don't want to vomit in front of other people, and I don't want to see other people vomit, because I don't know how I would handle it. So that is also very situation-based comedy that is in Triangle of Sadness.
that is endlessly fascinating. And we talked there about kind of societal expectations. You know, it's the man is expected to look after his wife and kids, and he's expected to do that for her. And even there, you talk about etiquette. Is that kind of social expectation something that appeals to you? Your understanding of the world and kind of how we are expected to do certain things, is that something that appeals to you as a creator?
Very much. I think that very often it's like something about our human nature, our primal needs and instinct that all of us have to deal with. But then we have the culture and the culture expectation that can be gender expectations, or many different kind of like culture expectations that we try to live up to. And this is almost something that is put onto us. And it's not always that these cultural expectations are that easy to live up to in all different situations. So I love when there's a clash between us being animals and then being civilized. So something in between, like the civilized and the animal, it very often happens something interesting that says something about us human beings.
And what has film taught you about being a human? Because for me, film has taught me so much. Film has kind of taught me how to live. Without film, I don't know what I'd be. But what has film taught you, maybe not as an artist, but just as a person, about being a person and about understanding other people? Has it affected you in that way? Or do you look
Well, there are so many examples of movies that in some way have given me a greater understanding of
really?
maybe being someone else in someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
And I think that when it comes to moving images, I think moving images have a great potential and a great, let's say, to communicate something about us, to show something about us. It's completely different from literature or written language, because when it comes to moving images, we can actually basically things can happen at the same time, and we don't have to evaluate them in the same way that if we are writing them. If we are writing them, we have to decide what are we going to write first, what are we going to end up second. But moving image actually have the possibility of going in and like in a more, I would say, neutral way, just observing and watching. And I think it's kind of interesting to think of nature filmmaking, you know, like when you're filming animals, that you can have almost the same approach when you're filming human beings. So without morally and ethically evaluate what the animals are doing, you can look at the, human beings in the same way.
And I mean, because when you talk about that, I'm reminded of Terrence Malick, who, I mean, Colin Farrell was doing an interview where he was talking, and Colin felt like he was delivering the best monologue of his career, and Terrence is kind of filming him. But then there's a bird going by, and Terrence kind of picks up the camera and he begins filming a bird. And I think it is that kind of, it's fascinating to hear you talk about observing something through the lens of a camera. Do you try and observe human behavior through the lens of a camera? Is that what you're trying to do as a filmmaker, observe how humans act?
Well, when I'm directing, I always try to ask myself, do I believe in what I see? Do I think this is possible? And that is from the basis of being a human being and my knowledge of being a human being, of course. But if I feel that, no, I don't believe in this, I don't think it's possible, then I feel a little bit that I have not succeeded. So
Really?
I when I'm starting a shooting day and we're putting up the camera and so on, I often start with a master shot when you basically can see all the actors in that shot. And from that master shot is where I'm doing most of the adjustments of the scene.
Wow.
Because I want it to be possible for me to look at the whole scene and not with the possibility of cutting in it, but actually like a long sequence shot, and to believe it in what's going on in front of the lens. And very often, you know, the scenes become very long when you do like that, because the hard thing is to decrease the length, to make it compact and to make it dynamic.
Yeah.
But I always want to believe in what I'm looking at. And yes, sometimes I'm even consider the scenes like a reconstruction of something that have never happened. So this is the idea, what I want to happen. Okay, now let's try to reconstruct what I have written here on the page.
Wow.
And make it happen in the way that I believe in.
That is terrific. And how much of your idea can you bring to life in a percentage? If you had to say, like, could you get 70% of what you have in your head? Because I know some directors who are like, if I can get 50% of how it looks in my head, I'd be okay with that. But what about you as a filmmaker? Is it like, do you look at that and you're like, if I can get even a bit of this, I'd be happy?
I would say that I think a good shooting day, then I managed to get almost all the aspects that I have been interested in. But I always leave a little space of something unexpected to happen also. But I can tell you a little bit how a shooting day works for me, because as I said, in the starting of a shooting day, I'm investigating the scene and I'm looking in a quite critical way on the actors and also what I have written, and I ask myself, do I believe in it? Then I try to do adjustments. And also in the beginning of the day, I give the freedom for the actors to take risks. You know, if they feel that they have an impulse in the body, that they want to do something that is connected to the context of the situation, they are free to do it. And then we can say, okay, take that away or keep it and so on. And hopefully we manage to shape a scene that I'm happy with and that I think is interesting in some way. The hard thing with film directing is to reach something that is popping out, that becomes, you know, that becomes adding something to the other images that all the other filmmakers all over the world have created. You always try to push up something that you have not seen before. And if you get that, if you get hold of that, then what I do is start to repeat over and over, do take over and over. And very often it goes better and better up to take 20 somewhere. Then it gets worse. Then
Really?
the actors are getting a little tired.
Wow.
The words that they are saying is stop having a meaning. And then I'm always like almost like a football coach. So he's trying to encourage them. Okay, come on now, everybody. We need to like push in some energy here. And hopefully we reach above the level of take 20. Then if I have time, because I have quite much time on set, then I say, okay, take half an hour break. And when everybody comes back on set, I say, we have 5 takes left. Then it ends with a countdown. The shooting day should end with a countdown, you know, like, okay, 4 takes left. Come on, everybody, 3 takes left. So I try to build a feeling of now there is a presence where that matters. Almost like an important football game, you know, like, okay, now we're playing this football game together. Now
Buzzer's about to go.
Yes. And I even started with Trial of Sadness. I brought the gong to the set, you know, so you could hit the gong. So instead of saying action on the last take, I hit the gong. And then when it's completely silent, I give one of the actors the cue to start the scene. So it's a combination of me. A shooting day is a combination of for me to investigate the scene, to create something that you don't feel improvisation, because I don't like improvisation in the end result. You can use improvisation in a way to get to the core of the scene and what you really want the scene to be, what should be included in the scene. But in the end, it can't feel like improvisation at all. Then it have to feel like it's now or never. We are creating something together. Let's really evaluate this moment now when we have pushed the rec button and create something that is going to be strong enough to keep for the editing.
Wow. And so does that drain you as a person? Because to me, I got to go onto my first ever film set a few weeks ago because there's a film studio here in Wicklow called Ardmore Studios, and there's a new horror film being shot there. And I was there like a 13-hour day, and I wish I could have stayed for longer. But like you could kind of feel it is draining, you know, when you're shooting something, you're trying to get it perfect, then you move on to the next thing. As a person, does that drain you at all? That process of doing that many takes and trying to keep the truth?
It does, of course. I
Wow.
mean, I also think mentally it's very important to prepare everybody that is on a set together with me, that every day have the potential of being the hardest shooting day in your life. So if you at least say that, maybe it's not true. Maybe there are other directors that is demanding much more. But if you have that mental preparation, then the actors and everybody that is working is also kind of prepared that it's going to be really, really tough every day. And then they don't feel that it's so tough, actually. Then they quite often have a lot of energy when the day is over.
Wow.
But if they think that shooting is only going to be 9 to 5 and it's not going to demand anything of them, then every day will be very, very exhausting. But if you really, really, you know, prepare yourself that, okay, yeah, every day on set and every day we are shooting is going to demand something from you. I think it's important to have that kind of attitude, because I mean, you know, filmmaking for me is so much about, maybe it's connected to the years when I was doing the ski films, because when you were doing the ski films, you always try to capture the moment when the skier were doing something that was spectacular enough and they pulled it off in a beautiful way and they managed to do the landing and they didn't fall. You know, everything was about capturing that moment when all these things worked together, and the light should work together, and the snow should be in a way that they can do their performance and so on. So for me, it comes very much from, I come from a background when it's about to capture that unique moment. That's maybe also why I've been talking a lot about YouTube and that all of a sudden, you know, when everybody could upload the videos that really got attention and then went through the algorithm were the ones that had something unique about it. So yeah, for me, starting that camera, pushing the camera, recording the camera is to try to reach something that is unique that happens in front of the camera.
That's so amazing, right? Because I look at you and I look at your films and I think this is someone who's not human. This is someone who is so above us all and who can create these things. But to hear that, you know, there are days where you're like, this is hard. It's amazing. I've just never considered that that's something you would go through. We talked a little bit about that element of filmmaking of not knowing what's about to happen. There's something waiting to surprise you. Does that scare you as a filmmaker? That element of this could go either way? Does that
Yes,
scare you?
of course. Oh my God, that is so painful. But shooting
Really?
it can be equally fun, but it can also be equally painful. I mean, because when you're writing a scene and you have high expectations that this scene can be good, very often in the start of a shooting day, it's just like, oh my God, this is horrible. I don't know how to pull this off. And hopefully you manages to work it in a way so you feel happy about it, but it's always like a constant stress that you will not reach the level that you're hoping for.
Yeah.
So of course it's hard to have this short amount of time in order to reach what you want to reach. And then I must say that I have around 70 shooting days on my film. So sometimes I have a little bit more than at least some other directors have. So I have quite much time, but still I always feel stressed. And yeah.
That is so fascinating to me. And do you feel like now you're at a point where you're able to manage that better and you're better as a filmmaker at getting what you know you want from when you started?
That is also an interesting question, because, you know, the better you get, the harder it gets to come to the point where you feel, wow, And in the beginning, it was easier to get to the wow feeling. Wow, now I'm happy with what I'm done. But
Wow.
the longer I've been working, the more experience you get, the harder it is to get to the moment when you feel like, wow, now it was like pushing above what my expectation was. And that is the feeling that you're looking for, that you're aiming for. So actually, I think it becomes harder and harder all the time to make movies.
Wow.
Instead of the other way around. Maybe
Really?
that's part of the reason why it's fun to make movies, because it never gets easier. And it's also something when it comes to movie making that is, I had a teacher on the film school, or that now is a friend of mine, and Kalle Boman is a film producer that have been working since the 60s in Sweden, and he had been working with directors like Roy Andersson and Bo Widerberg, that is in Sweden at least two well-known directors. And he said that the only general thing about filmmaking is that there's nothing general. And it really says something about it, because, you know, there's so many different parameters and things that can and have to be changed in order to reach where you want to reach. But it's not always easy to say what parameter, what it is that have to be changed. So yeah, I don't want to scare anyone away from filmmaking, because I mean, this is exactly what makes it fun.
Yeah.
But I think also one, how to say, an aspect of the personality that I meet from many of the filmmakers that I meet is that they have stamina. They have the stamina to put in the energy in the work in order to reach their vision.
That's amazing. And you bring up a point. I've wanted to talk about this. I don't know if you saw, but Quentin Tarantino recently mentioned after 10 films, he plans to retire. And, you know, his argument for that was that he has found that no filmmaker's best film has ever been their last. You know, he's found that filmmakers kind of, they hit their peak, and then their films kind of, you know, significantly get lesser in a way. And it was an interesting way to look at it. And I was listening to another interview with Christopher McQuarrie, who I got to interview. I'm one of his biggest fans. He's the nicest guy ever. Everyone, he directs Mission Impossible, and he wrote Usual Suspects up here. But Christopher McQuarrie was saying he thinks it's not so much that filmmakers get worse. You know, it's not like a sport. You don't pass your prime and all of a sudden you're slower. It's a matter of they stop challenging themselves. You know, is it still a struggle for you to challenge yourself on each new film you'd make?
Yes, in many ways there are, of course. I think that what I'm looking for is either a certain kind of structure of the film that makes it a challenge to me, or something with the setup of the film. Like, for example, when it comes to Force Majeure, then it's like one family that is on a ski resort for 7 days, and the structure of the film was these different ski days. And then I said to myself, what I want to do is to create the most spectacular avalanche scene in the history of filmmaking. So by saying that, is to push up the bar and try to create a challenge for yourself.
Wow.
Then when I made the square, then the square, the origins from an art piece that me and Kalle Boman did, that is like this white marked square, where we wanted to create a social contract around, like similar to a pedestrian crossing. You know, a pedestrian crossing, then we have made a contract that is that the cars should be careful with the pedestrians. They should stop for the pedestrians. And then the idea with the square was that we can make a white marked square that we can put in the center of the cities, so we can remind the citizens that we have a responsibility for each other. We have a responsibility for how things are working in the city, and to help each other out and so on. And how do you make a film about that? And when it came to Triangle of Sadness, then it was like, okay, can I combine the film that was fashion world, luxury yacht, and deserted island, like these three different parts? With the challenge was really to not make a film start over every time it went into the next. And this time, when it comes to the entertainment system is down, I can briefly tell you a little bit about the setup of Entertainment System is Down. It's a film that takes place on a long-haul flight. And quite soon after takeoff, if you think about a flight that is maybe London to Sydney or something like that, 20 hours. a long flight. Quite soon after takeoff, the passengers gets the horrible news that the entertainment system is not working. So all of a sudden we have modern human beings that are used to scroll, and constantly distract ourselves with our smartphones and iPads and so on. When these gadgets are charging out, we have modern human beings that are doomed to analog boredom. And then we have only one place, like almost like a chamber play, that I have to create dynamic and that I have to make interesting. And so I guess that I always look for a certain kind of setup that is new for me in some way, that I feel that I'm not in control. And
That is brilliant. And I mean, you talk about your new film there. I'd love to ask you, just as a filmmaking standpoint, I think 12 Angry Men is one of the most awe-inspiring films ever made because of how it visually tells a story that's basically 12 people sitting down talking. Like, that's mind-boggling to me. So have you thought about visually telling a story set on a plane and how you could visually do that? Is that something you're even sure, or is this just a silly question?
No, definitely. We are talking about it right now. And me and Fredrik Benzel, that is the DOP that I've been working with since first Majeure. We have had a little bit of a goal of trying to create an epic experience, even though the film, like 90% of this takes place inside an airplane.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? But it's fun then if you set a challenge for yourself. How do you make that epic visual? And we have not found the answer yet, but we're going to go into the work and see if it's possible to do that. Let's see.
That is so brilliant. So when this film comes out and you have found your way to do it, we'll get to see in real time you trying to figure out.
You to say if I succeeded or not. Then the audience have to tell me, like, okay, did I succeed or not to make an epic visual experience?
And that doesn't scare you, knowing that someone will watch this and try and critique. I mean, so everyone's always going to critique it, but when you're trying to create something so new and something you are challenging yourself.
I actually think that the audience are looking in a little bit different way, because I think if someone would say that when they are talking about their film, I would be curious to see if they succeed or not. And of course, I understand there's a risk involved in making a statement like that. So, but for me, it's interesting to use this kind of statement in order to improve my own performance.
Yeah, you're forcing yourself.
Said it. I have to also put some energy in to make it happen.
So now you've signed a social contract that you have to try your best, or else my millions and millions of fans will be gutted. And they'll come to Sweden and hold signposts outside your house.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the joys of being a YouTuber. No, another thing I'd love to ask you is that as a filmmaker, we talk about so much things that could go wrong and so much things that might not work. It's sunny in the script. It's raining. Do you have to be a bit like Bruce Lee, like wet, like water, and kind of be able to move and maneuver through all these obstacles and things? Because I mean, a lot of it is problem solving. You have to be able to deal with those problems that come onto your plate and things you didn't even expect and things just appear and be able to deal with them quickly.
I 100% know what you're talking about. I mean, it depends, of course. Sometimes it's that you are too much in control when you're doing a scene. So there's no like life that comes to it, and nothing that surprises you, and nothing really, how to say, gives energy on the day of the shooting, because that is an aspect also to make a scene that is really, really good. That there's something that comes to you as a surprise, and then there it is. And just that can create some energy on set that is lifting up the scene also. So to be too much in control and be too prepared can also be bad for sometimes the performance from the actors and so on. But for me, I can feel quite, how to say, secure and safe if I have a setup of a situation that I know that I think is interesting and that I'm curious about. It's all about my curiosity. So if I don't feel that I'm curious about shooting the scene, then I'm very worried. Then I feel, okay, yes, because then I feel like, oh, how is this going to work out? Because I don't know myself really what the motivation and the energy comes from. I always try to avoid scenes like this, like small in-between scenes that doesn't have this energy for me. But if I'm super curious about shooting a scene, then I often very happily go to set that morning. But what can happen then, of course, as you said, with all the different obstacles and so on that comes in, is that I get disappointed because I feel I don't reach the level of work that I want to reach. But once again, you know, time on set, and I think this is something that maybe also could be interesting to talk about the film industry in general, because what have happened these days is that we have a technique that is much cheaper than it was 20 years ago, and we still can produce things on a very high level, but still the production gets more and more expensive. And I mean, if we want to be able to do something that is reaching above our own expectations, of course, once again, we need time. And I think it would be interesting to create a certain kind of manifesto dogma and talk about if we can scale down the production teams and spend more time on set and make sure that everyone is paid in a really good way and so on. But today it's almost like that the productions are getting too big in actually being able to work in the pace that I want to work with.
What? So you feel like that hinders you creatively in a way as an artist?
Yes, because it's not. I think for me, filmmaking is very hands-on. Since I also come from a background where I was basically filming and editing and doing everything by myself, I think that you know, when you put up the camera and what is in front of the camera and what it looks like, it's no rocket science, you know, like you just have to work in a very methodical way in order to reach where you want to reach. But then it is so, like, you know, I can move these things in the screen. I can change the setup a little bit.
Yeah.
We have people that are standing on set and just waiting to go over there and change the position of the seat. It's also a little bit like you get less and less hands-on in the filmmaking. I think we, with all the respect for everybody that have this as a profession, I think we need to think about what is creating the best films and what is improving filmmaking in these days, and look a little critical on the kind of economy that is involved in these big productions.
Wow, that is so fascinating, and that's a point I've never really thought about before. Because when I was on that film set a few weeks ago, there was so much people, there was carpet, and I kind of always assumed everyone on a film set would be like film purists, and they'd all be talking about Godard in their off time. But there was people just showing up in football jerseys who were like drilling on set and then going, and it was really fascinating to see that element. But it's so fascinating that actually how that affects you as a director, because I never even considered it from that aspect. Wow.
I think often, like as a European director, and you come to a production in the US, I've heard quite many of my colleagues, European colleagues, coming there and be a little bit shocked. You know, like there's like 5 big trailers standing there, and like, but we are going to shoot in a room that is 5 times 5 square meters. Like, well, what are all this equipment doing here? You know, so. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing. I never, for some reason, it never occurred to me that making a film in Sweden would obviously be different than making a film in New York with an American production company. Let me ask you this. Do you consider yourself an auteur?
I went to film school between 95 and 98 and 2001. And you know, the teachers that I had in the film school, all of them had been very inspired of the French New Wave. And I mean, it was Godard and Truffaut and these guys that started to talk about the auteur as a filmmaker, and that the auteur should be someone that have, you know, a signature way of the film. You know? An auteur should write their scripts by themselves, etc., etc. And so I'm very much, how do you say, trained by that generation that got to know about the concept of the auteur and so on, and to have a certain kind of personal signature and something that is connected to my way of filmmaking, I would love if it is like that people that see my films feels, even if they don't know it's me that have done it, that it feels like a Ruben Ostlund film. That would be like something that I would be happy about if people could recognize my style in that way. So yes, I would consider that the auteur tradition is something that I'm connected to in some way.
That's amazing, yeah. Because I've just been thinking about that kind of the version of auteur filmmaking and kind of what it means, and there's these different understandings of it. And then there are some filmmakers who would actually look at themselves and say actively, no, I'm not. Like I'm actively not being an auteur when I make films like this or when I do it in such a way. And it's this kind of endlessly fascinating conversation, I think. But no, that is so amazing to hear you talk about your work in such a way. Let me ask you this. You've made so much films, and you put them out into the world, and anyone can watch it. I'm working on my first short film now, and I've talked with so much filmmakers, and something that I never even occurred was that making something and putting it out there is actually, it's a scary thing to do. It's kind of scary, put your name on something, and then all of a sudden it's out in the world, and in a way it doesn't belong to you. Do you struggle with that at all, putting your work out there, or have you done it so much now it's second nature to you that you can put out a film?
There are different parts of the process that is scary when it comes to that, I would say. I think that the most painful part of that process is when you have made your first cut version of the film. And for me, often it's like maybe 1 hour longer than an actual version is going to be in the end. But when you screen that version for an audience, then it's always the kind of response that you get is always like it's killing some kind of the expectations that this time it will go easy. It never goes easy. And the editing process is so much about watching the film together with an audience in order to understand the dynamics and the rhythm of the film. But when you have gone through that process and you have started to understand this is how my film works with an audience, you're not going to be so surprised when you have the premiere screening of your film. So I would definitely advise you that when you're working with the film, that test screenings together with an audience, because if you want to make movies for the cinema, one of the aspects of cinema is that you have the audience sitting together in one room. That aspect is changing so much when it comes to how the film communicates. So if you're sitting alone in front of one screen, the pace and the rhythm of the film would be something completely different than if it's like 50 people in the room. So this is something that you can avoid, the fear of putting it out in the world, because you can know much enough about the film to understand basically how it works. Then I would say another thing that I'm trying to encourage the students that is on the film school where I teach in Gothenburg in Sweden. I'm a teacher on Akademi Valand Film, which is a bachelor in film directing. And it is that I encourage all the students to be more open about their process. I think that there's something about the film director, the cliche idea about the film director is that he's a silent genius and he's in connection with God, and he doesn't tell anyone what he's doing. He's writing his genius scripts and then he lets it out to the world. But I see filmmaking much more as a social and collective process. And when I have an idea, I always start to tell people about this idea. Listen, this is what I'm working on. I'm working on a film that takes place on a long-haul flight. The entertainment system goes down. And when I say this to people, they are going to tell me, you know what, I actually experienced something kind of similar. Listen to this. And then I get ideas just by being open with the process. But I also train myself in order how to tell about the idea verbally. And when I know how to tell about my film verbally, that when I can tell it from the beginning to the end, that's the moment when I can sit and write it down. I can't do it before. I never sit and write scripts like, oh yeah, let's guess what is happening. I always know each scene at least what they have, what setup they have.
So you have it in your head before your pen touches the page.
Yes, yeah. And because I need to have a structure. Like I need to have a structure that this is the start, this is where we're going, then this is happening. I pretty much know all the different scenes in it. Then individually the scenes can develop and change when I'm writing. But for me, that is also a way of trying to understand the film, the spirit of the film, the core of the film, and so on, by being open when it comes to the process. and it makes it less lonely, and it also makes it make it less surprising when you're letting it out in the world.
Wow, that's brilliant. And this may be a silly question, but I'd want to ask you, do you ever find yourself come up with an idea and you're like, that's a bad idea, that doesn't work? Does that ever happen to you? Or is it now like you can kind of process it through yourself, those ideas?
Well, what I do is always that I take notes. So I write in my phone as soon as I have an idea that I think is interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm not really harsh on the ideas. Then I just like write them down, and then later on when I read them through, very much of these ideas is never going to make it to the script or make it to the film. But yes, of course, I remember a couple of moments when I had really, really bad ideas, and I you know, the thing when you get an idea is that you feel you're almost like you are crouching.
Yeah.
As you are a tiger, you know, so you're like,
Yeah.
oh, this can be good. And now you're looking at the prey and I'm going to attack it.
Yeah.
And when you get that feeling, I mean, that is the most joyful moments of being a creative, I think, is to see the possibility ahead of you. And then all of a sudden you realize, but that was not a good idea. And when it happens, of course, then you were thinking, what were I thinking in the moment when I believed this was a good idea? But I tend to not be too harsh on myself. Then I quite often figure out when I'm then telling my friends, like I have a couple of close friends, like my wife and Eric Hemmedorf that have produced my films, and colleagues that is on my production company. And when I tell them about the idea, I can immediately use their instrument in order to evaluate the idea because they know me.
Yes.
If they feel like, wait a minute, now you're like, what is this? We don't get it.
They'll tell you.
They tell me, and then, of course, then I have to decide, do I trust that I'm right? Then I have to find another way to communicate the idea because I have to convince them before I can go and make the film. Not that they would stop me or anything, but I will stop myself if I don't manage to use the people that I trust in and listen to them. If I can't convince them, then probably something is wrong. So this happens now and then sometimes I have to go back and think of, okay, how should I put the words in order to communicate this in a way so I also can convince them it's a good idea.
Wow. And at the end of the day, do you feel like you make films for you or for the audience?
For me, definitely.
Yeah.
But I think that when I was younger, I had this little bit of this European art house cinema approach to filmmaking, you know, that I don't care how the film works in the cinema. And the people that gets it, they get it. And
If you don't, you don't.
If you don't, you don't. And I mean, in some ways, I still think this, but I also think that there's a disease when it comes to cinema in Europe, because Europe have been now for many years very dependent on state funding, so money from the state.
Yeah.
And what happens when you're looking for the money from the state all the times is that when you get the state funding money, you're economically safe, so you don't have to reach the audience. So you are basically finished working with the film financially when you are starting to produce it. But if you look at the American system, then you can tell that if they are not successful in the cinemas, then they are going to lose their job. They're going to go bankrupt.
Yes.
So they have to punch all the way out and really reach the audience. Otherwise, the film is not going to work. In Europe, actually, with that European financing system, we are not dependent on that the film is going to go well in the box office. And this is not 100% healthy. I think that we have to be inspired of, even if I'm pro for a state-funded film institute like the Swedish Film Institute we have in Sweden, we also have to learn something from the films that have to compete on the economical market in order to be successful. So, yeah, it was a shift in attitude that happened between Play and Force Majeure for me. When I did Play, I was really more like of a dogmatic European art house filmmaker. And then after after making that, then I felt like, yeah, I have to let go of this kind of attitude, because yeah, it's something about that way of filmmaking that is too connected to European state-funded system.
Yeah. Wow, absolutely. And my last couple of questions before I let you go, I'd love to ask you, you edit a lot of your own work as well. And so how did you, because you talk about the rhythm of film, like if you're watching a film in the cinema and there's something that's supposed to make you laugh, some people don't realize that there's a 2-second pause for people to laugh and kind of move on. And there's all these small moments that to you may not even realize, but these things come together in the edit. How did you as a filmmaker understand and learn that sense of rhythm in film? Did you start out, was it something that you struggled with at the start, trying to get that pacing right, trying to get the scene transitions to work smoothly, trying to make sure everything works on a cinematic level? Was that something you ever struggled with, or is this something that is more easier to you as a filmmaker?
I think that when it comes to making the rhythm right for humor, for example, I thought it was inspiring to hear how John Cleese and Monty Python was working when they were working. And I don't know if Monty Python was involved in A Fish Called Wanda, but John Cleese directed A Fish Called Wanda. And I know that when they did A Fish Called Wanda, which was a successful film in the 90s, a comedy, they were doing 12 test screenings with an audience when they were just fine-tuning and tweaking the humor in order to make the timing 100% right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you do it for a cinema, it's going to be one pace and one rhythm. And if you do it for like the individual screens, it's going to be a different rhythm. And then you have to try them out in these two different windows. For me, when it comes to humor, I like to balance my scenes so they can be, both tragic and comical at the same time, almost. Yeah. So and I like the kind of scenes that it's not, how to say, 100% deciding for the audience what they should think, but I want them to be very engaged. I want them to be involved. I don't want them to be, how to say, drop out, of course. So build my dynamics in my films, and the pace in the films is just to try to catch the attention of the audience and keep them looking. And I think that I sorry.
No worries at all. You're back now. I can see you.
I don't know what happens, but yeah. No, but when I was in film school, I was very inspired on Michael Haneke, the Austrian filmmaker. And for me, he was like the master of suspense. He managed to create a suspense, even if his films had a slow pace. It still demanded my concentration, 100% my concentration when I was watching his films. And I like there's something about a scene when I think it's really good, is that it dares to take its time. And if it's rushing through a little bit too quickly, it loses something.
Really?
So it's a scene that is like confident enough to work in a pace that is maybe not the fastest pace, and dare to demand the attention from the audience, and that I feel is the strongest way, or have had most impact on me. So yeah. And then what I do when I'm editing like a scene, like for example, if I want the scene to have a comical touch to it, or like that the audience should react on it from a comical approach, it's very often like what the in and the out points of the scenes. So the scenes that I cut, I try to make them as long as possible when I cut them. Then when I'm working on the whole editing, then I decide where should I go into the scene and where should I go out from the scene.
Yeah.
And this is where the in and the out point are. You quite often you don't have to start the scene exactly as it says in the script. You can actually go in maybe one line later or so on. And it's going to change quite much the pace of the scene.
Yeah.
So for me, I work a lot with the in and the out points of the actual scenes. But the scenes, when I have cut them, I treat them like, okay, bam, that's when it's finished. Then I do some recutting sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's much more about, okay, let's go out of the scene there and let's go into the scene there.
Wow. And so can you watch your own work as a filmmaker?
I heard that Werner Herzog said once that he likes his films in the same way that he likes his children. You know, that with all the mistakes and error and everything that they do, you still love them. And I have definitely had that approach to my movies for my first films. Definitely.
Yes, sir.
I feel the more movies I made, the more experience I have, the more critical I get. So I feel
Wow.
more critical towards my latest films than I am to my early films. So, but I really hope that I can keep on having that loving relationship towards my films, and that I can forgive them with all the mistakes that there are included.
That's amazing. That reminds me of a story of Francis Ford Coppola recording commentary for The Godfather. And the whole commentary track is him like, oh, why would I put this car in that shot? This shot, I've lingered for too long. And it's like, if Francis can't watch The Godfather, what are the rest of us even doing? You know, it's like, how can we watch our own works? But
Sure.
man, my last and final question before I let you go, what advice would you have for anyone looking to become a filmmaker?
For me, it have always been very important to have a group of friends to work together with. And I believe in the power of the collective, in the commune, so to speak. And I think maybe this comes a little bit from my great grandfather. He was a mecenat. He had an artist collective with a group of painters in Sweden in the beginning of the 1900s, like 1920, 1930. And he had one advice for this group of young painters when they started. And it was like, you can fight as much as you want, but stay together. Keep referring to the collective, and the name of the artist collective was Halmstadgruppen, the Halmstad group. Halmstad is a city in Sweden, and they kept on doing that. They kept on talking about Halmstadgruppen. They kept on referring to each other, and it made that group of people still today. Halmstadgruppen is quite known in Sweden. So I believe that if you are a group of people working together. One thing is, of course, that you can work on each other films, and the kind of economy that comes from that is so great when it comes to start up a film. So you don't have to sit and wait for like people putting money in your films, but you actually can start to produce them and work with each other. And then now when I'm working with a platform production, that is the production company I've had now since 20 years. 22 years. We are 6 different directors that are working together, and we have said now that the goal is that we should exist as a production company for 50 years. So we have a long-term idea that we should work together. So I would say find those friends that you like to work together with, and I would say they are probably very close to you. They're not far away. It's not that they are like you're going to meet them on the other side of the Atlantic, or that they have to be especially super skilled in filmmaking. If you have the same interest in filmmaking as you, they are the ones that is going to create the right collective for you when you're working.
Wow, everyone, that's some advice from one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, Ruben. I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for allowing me to interview you. You could not have been kinder and send this up. And I'm so sorry it's so late in Sweden. I feel horrible. But I was so nervous for this because you're someone who like I look up to, and I was like, I hope I don't ask the wrong questions. So I just want to say thank you for allowing me to interview you from the bottom of my heart. Before we finish up, are you on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter? Is there anywhere people can go follow you?
Yes, I'm on Instagram. So yeah, follow my Instagram account. I'm going to post things now when I'm working on the entertainment system is down. And yeah, usually I answer also if people ask me questions there. So you're welcome to visit my Instagram account.
That's amazing. Everyone go follow Ruben over on Instagram. Is there any new projects you can promote or anything people should keep an eye out for?
Well, one movie that Platform Production have produced that I'm quite proud over. It's 2 friends of mine that have directed a film that is about the history of the camera. And it starts with the camera obscura, like that you have a hole and the light comes in and that actually an image occurs by itself. It's the camera obscura. And then how the photography is invented, how moving images is invented, and how cinema is invented, how the digital era have influenced filmmaking and how we're using moving images. So it's a beautiful, beautiful film about the history of the camera, and it has some amazing moving images in it. Not film scenes, not fictional scenes or anything like that. Nothing that is connected to film history, but the ability of the camera to capture something that is unique and then to save it and then to be able to show it over and over again and to bring some knowledge with that content. So if you have the possibility, watch And the King Said, What a Fantastic Machine.
The King Said what? That's a great title. And the King Said what a fan. That's brilliant. Wow, everyone. And Ruben, before I let you go, I just have to tell you this in there. I think about that scene from The Square, you know, the monkey and like diner scene. I think about that scene at least once every day. So I just had to tell you this in this interview. No, everyone, I'll touch you a little bit off air, Ruben, but everyone, thank you guys so much for watching. Go check out Ruben's work. Truly, I mean it. He's one of the greatest filmmakers alive. And as always, if you have the means, please make sure to donate to the National Deaf Children Society. Link for that in the description. You can go follow me over on Instagram, DanielFeet33. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Stay safe. And also shout out to my friend Max, who loved Triangular Sadness. But no, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.